I'm Deacon Richard Stonier. I'm 30 years old. I'm finishing my studies in seminary at the moment here in Rome, but shortly I'll go home to Johannesburg, South Africa, which is my diocese, where hopefully I'll be ordained a priest at the end of this year. I think Our Lady for me was a big surprise. I think for a lot of my spiritual life growing up, I didn't really understand a lot about Our Lady. I kind of knew who she was in relationship to our Lord, and in relationship to the Bible and even the teachings of the church and things. But only I think after I made a consecration to Our Lady, did I really experience a real relationship with her and really experience the closeness of a mother, and a praying mother so close that the saints speak about, that the spiritual writers speak about, only after that. So she was very surprising, a wonderful surprise. Worth to pray the Rosary, sure. Well, to begin with, I suppose we could say, technically speaking, that it's not necessary to pray the Rosary, but is it worth it? You know, it's not necessary in the sense that it's a private devotion. It's a devotion that's been given to the Church and has been practiced in the Church for many centuries, but it's a private devotion. But what a private devotion! There's never been any private devotion that's been so, even on the level of the life of the Church, that's been so practiced and prayed on such a universal level and loved for so many centuries, and even on so many religious habits as like a sign of prayer and holiness of the Church, and loved and promoted by so many saints. And then even looking at the authority of the Church, so many like papal letters and recommendations and even encyclicals and things like that, where the whole Church is saying it's worth it to pray. It's worth it to pray the Rosary. Maybe even more so than ever. I'll tell you why I think so. I think the Rosary, obviously, it's a meditative prayer. It's an introduction to contemplate our Lord's life. And I think in that it offers us a bit of silence in today, which is pretty noisy and with so many distractions and superficiality and things like that, that the Rosary is certainly a kind of antidote to that, because it invites us to go beyond the superficial and to contemplate. I'm sure I've received so many graces through the Rosary that I'll only know in heaven, because that's a place where I'll bring intentions and bring people and maybe pray a mystery, or even just one of the Hail Marys for someone or for something. And I know, obviously, Our Lady hears and uses those prayers, so no doubt I've received loads of graces that I don't even know about, and many that are even apparent, but maybe I can think of Well, in a way, my discernment of my vocation was very, very linked to Our Lady, especially after consecrating myself to Our Lady. That became a possibility. I think she kind of did that for me, just to kind of allow me to consider the vocation to the priesthood, and at the same time, as I said, the Rosary was very much a part of being consecrated to Our Lady. And in fact, so I spent about a year praying and thinking about what our Lord might be calling me to, and if He was calling me to the priesthood. And I remember that it was after I was praying the Rosary, I was going for a walk praying the Rosary, and I wasn't very attentive. In fact, I was at the time I was quite annoyed, because I felt like our Lord was asking me to sacrifice certain things and certain friendships and that I thought were perfectly fine and healthy and good, and it was very difficult for me to lay those things down. And I was feeling quite annoyed at this prospect. And so I was praying the Rosary, but I wasn't even praying very attentively. And I remember while I was praying that I didn't have any kind of locution or vision or anything, but there was just a kind of intuition, like an interior prompting or thought that I think came from our Lord, saying to me, I felt like our Lord was saying to me, if this was the cross I wanted you to carry for the rest of your life, would it be worth it? And I had to kind of sit down and like really think about that question, because I was really feeling, I think the Lord was letting me feel a little bit of the weight of the cross in that moment. And then eventually being able to say, okay, if this is what you were asking of me, of course it would be worth it. And then I think for the first time in a kind of clear way, just kind of feeling that, again, that kind of an interior prompting or intuition, that our Lord was asking me to be a priest and to be Our Lady's priest. So I think that was definitely connected to obviously to Our Lady, but specifically to the Rosary. I think the obvious one is just the virtue of piety, or the gift of piety, the virtue of religion. Obviously just praying and being contemplative and being with our Lord. Like John Paul II says, contemplating our Lord at the school of Our Lady, I think that really helps us, and has helped me kind of deepen that understanding of our Lord, that piety, and then with an act, a real religious act, increasing in the virtue of religion by just praying the Rosary. I mean, that's quite an obvious one. And I think definitely, obviously, the virtue of chastity is always connected to Our Lady. She obviously loves that virtue so much and helps people a lot with that virtue. And I think certainly, most certainly, through the Rosary, contemplating our Lord's life through her eyes is a winning solution to someone who wants to grow in that virtue. The Annunciation, I think that's always been a wonderful point of reference. I think in a way it's definitely one of the favorite mysteries of the Church. The Church loves that mystery. Even just contemplating every day with the Angelus. Even the Hail Mary itself is that mystery, and maybe that's why Our Lady's fiat and everything is kind of just there in that moment. That's changed everything, obviously. A priest couldn't survive without Our Lady, of course. That's for granted. To be united to Jesus, he has to make himself, he has to be a son of Our Lady. Also in his suffering, as well as in his priesthood and his ministry. And I think just looking at like what the Church suggests to priests in terms of the basics of the spiritual life, like obviously the celebration of the Mass and the liturgy of the hours and mental prayer, and there's always in there the Holy Rosary. And again, it's one of those mysteries of the Church that this prayer has that has been so powerful in the Church that it's just been, as a private devotion, has just been promulgated and promoted so much that it has to be something specifically given, obviously, by our Lord to the Church. And I think for a priest, especially for a secular priest who's got maybe many things to do and is running from this to that and is in the world and very prone to distraction and to losing his focus, the focus of his ministry, and to even noisiness, to being stuck on the superficial level of things, even in his preaching and in his prayer and things. Even as a seminarian, I can experience that with having to do many things and to get very distracted and caught up in doing things. And the solution of the Church is to pray. And Our Lady has given us this most magnificent prayer, which does exactly that. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, just that it makes us just pull up the handbrake and stop and contemplate our Lord's life. Forces us to pray in a slow way and repeating things, which again just maybe even brings to the surface our own distractions, but then becomes the antidote to those distractions.